All right, hello. My name's Omri, and I'm here to talk about my grade appeal for the assignment I received in federal government. I do want to say that I'm not, with my grade appeal, my intent isn't to attack Professor Hosey or his efforts in teaching my class. It's just I do believe in standing up for fairness and accuracy in grading. So my goal is really to receive the grade I worked for and earned for based on the course syllabus and what I was supposed to learn. And I also hope that maybe this could potentially be helpful to Mr. Hosey in the future for future assignments and grading. My appeal is going to be based on three things. One, Mr. Hosey not following the syllabus. Two, grading miscalculations. And three, unfair treatment. According to the syllabus, our learning outcomes are to demonstrate that we can think critically and that we can analyze government policies, but Mr. Hosey isn't following this in his grading policies. And an example I do have is with the quizzes we would take, we would have to do definitions word for word exactly, or we would lose points for each word that wasn't the exact definition. And on my letter assignment, Mr. Hosey didn't provide adequate feedback on how I ended up with a 60 on the assignment, which he originally gave me a 50 on. And his rubrics don't evaluate based on the learning outcomes, which leads to my second reason. And for my second reason, I'm going to focus on the final assignment as my main example. The rubric on the final assignment is not properly calculated simply because the assignment is worth 200 points. But based on the rubric, you could end up potentially losing an additional 250 points, meaning you could actually end up with a negative 250 as a grade. And this alone just makes the entire rubric wrong, which makes the entire grade calculation incorrect. In addition, the standards on the rubric are entirely focused on what Mr. Hosey does not want instead of defining what he does want. A prime example of this is if you look at the rubric, Mr. Hosey talks about what an awkward sentence and a confusing sentence. And these are both separate things you could potentially be marked off for, but his definition of them is the same and also is based more on his opinion, without an example or actual grammatical definition of it. This is arbitrary and subjective. Anyone in this room could look at my paper and actually debate about what is confusing or awkward because both have such similar definitions and aren't clearly defined. But not even Mr. Hosey ends up knowing how to grade the assignments properly, because instead of defining what good looks like, not just for us, he also needs to define it for himself so he can be more accurate and consistent with his grading. It just allows for too much inconsistency because he hasn't defined the standard on what he is grading on, and it's only based on what he does not want. So it's confusing for us, and it could also be confusing for him. And it causes him to be inconsistent with his grading, and it's not equitable or fair, which leads me to my final reason. I met with Mr. Hosey like he requested before the assignment and after I got my grade. When I asked Mr. Hosey for guidance on the content of my paper, he mainly focused on the grammar, which is not a learning outcome for the assignment. Instead of giving me feedback, he sent me to an English teacher to prove that he didn't mark any grammar wrong, which didn't help me on the content of my essay and understanding where I have messed up on that. I do want to add that I got a 45 on the assignment, and that is completely below standard. Making a 45 implies that I completely missed the mark on the assignment, and it means that I just hardly got anything right. And honestly, out of everyone in that class, me with my failing grade of a 45, I was the most entitled to some feedback on the content of my essay. However, instead of giving me feedback when I asked, he dismissed it and instead told me I should have kept coming to him until I understand, despite the fact that I did meet with him multiple times, and each of those times I felt I understood what he wanted me to do, and in spite of that, I failed the assignment. And not to mention, in his response, it ended up being really disrespectful to me as a student because he essentially refused to tell me why I failed and was trying to make it my fault for being too stupid to get it right or something. And as much as Mr. Hosey seems like a good person, and whether he meant that or not, that was still extremely rude to me as a student because it wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it to me because it ended up implying that I was foolish for getting a 45 on this assignment, and instead of maybe trying to better it for future assignments, I should just keep my 42 and learn that, oh, well, I failed, what can I do? Instead of maybe like, okay, how can I improve for next time? And I do want to add that I am in the top 2% of my class. Like, I'm varying on my grades. So just as a student, that's extremely disrespectful to almost be implying that I'm stupid, because I'm not stupid. And it doesn't really matter, because that just in the heat of the moment, that was overwhelming. And I just can't believe that I was being spoken to like that, especially since I do think Mr. Hosey is a good person. So it felt especially harsh to be receiving that treatment when I felt it wasn't justified in theory. Therefore, I'm asking the grade committee to either rescore my paper according to the rubric that he has, or him to reweigh the paper to be 450 points like the rubric, or just throw my final assignment out altogether. In addition, I want to get an appropriate grade on my letter to the congressman assignment, and I want the grade I earn to be based completely on the rubric and not undefined assignment outcomes and specificities. And also, I want proper feedback. And sorry, another request, but I would like for this to potentially be expedited, because at this point, for me, I've been going through this process since December, and I am a senior in high school, so this is unfortunately taking way too much time, and I would like for this to be expedited. Because they are getting ready to announce our class rank, so this really does affect me. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Omri. Okay, Professor Hosey, you may begin when you are ready.
I would also like to share my screen. Let me try to do that right now, please.
Sure.
Can everyone see the presentation?
We can see what looks like a syllabus.
Okay, that's the beginning of the presentation. Okay, I will start now. I would like to begin by presenting the syllabus for this class. I was on the campus of Iowa Colony for office hours, and they were held during the students' lunchtime. I encouraged Ms. Brooks to meet with me when she emailed on issues on September 10th. I don't believe that Ms. Brooks and I had a follow-up meeting. This, though, was not because, as Ms. Brooks states in her appeal, I am not accessible. In fact, ACC counselors at Iowa Colony would see me as I was leaving after lunch, which is held during fifth period at Iowa Colony. I have emails to confirm this. As to whether I was abrupt and vague during the meeting, I cannot say. I know that I've been told that I'm blunt, so abrupt may be an apt description. As for being vague, I doubt this seriously. Students often come to me looking for quick answers, but unfortunately, many are forced to listen to me drone on. I would never simply say follow the feedback. Another thing that I would point out in the course outline is that I spend the first day going over the syllabus. I spend the second class day going over major assignments and my expectations for this. This explanation of the final paper assignment took place on October 28th, and the assignment was due on November 11th, which is why I feel justified in weighting it so heavily. I next wish to note my general classroom policies. Sorry about that. In it, I state the comments should be addressed to the entire class and private conversations will be called out. I go over this with the students on the first day of class. Ms. Brooks states that I bully students into silence. What I will say is that every time I saw students engage in private conversations, I said, "What's that? Something to share with the entire class?" I did this almost every class, but I do not believe that Ms. Brooks was one of the students that I had to call out. Ms. Brooks also claimed I often tell students to contact my boss. On the first day of class, I wrote the email address of Professor Albert Passau, my department chair on the board. I told students if they had an issue in the class, they should contact me first. If they're still not satisfied, they should contact Professor Passau. It's true, I reiterated that point multiple times during the semester, but I always emphasize that students should contact me first. Another claim made by Ms. Brooks is that the assignments are not related to the learning outcomes. I think that both assignments address SLO2, demonstrate a knowledge of the federal system. I also believe the letter assignment addresses SLO7, describe the rights and responsibilities of the citizen. I believe the final paper addresses SLO8, analyze issues and policies in U.S. politics. Now, I will go through the letter assignment. We can see that there are a 25-point penalty for not addressing your letter to the correct U.S. representative. This is a large penalty, but I will point out that I gave the website to find the representative. Also in the rubric, it states that 15 points will be deducted for every paragraph that does not address all requirements listed in the assignment. In the second paragraph, she was missing a specific action of the government that would address the problem. While Ms. Brooks' original letter assignment seems to be missing, I've recreated as closely as I could how I would have graded it. You can see that I clearly wrote that this was not a U.S. representative, that at the end of paragraph 2, I wrote, what exactly should the government do? This indicated what the paragraph was missing. Whenever I return an assignment, I always take time to explain how I graded it to the whole class. I let students know what certain comments mean and the points that were deducted for them. In addition, I let students know that they can meet with me if they don't understand something. I assumed Ms. Brooks understood my grading for the letter assignment because I don't believe she contacted me about it. I stated this into an email to Dean George last December. Now, let us turn to the final paper assignment. The content of the assignment is worth 150 points, and the grammar is worth 50 points, for 200 points. The rubric for the content is located on page 5 of the final paper assignment. If a section's requirement is not completely addressed, 15 points are deducted. The requirement for the content of the paper is on page 2. All right? Now, again, I've had to regrade the assignment because the assignment seemed to be missing. So, the instructions for section 2 talk about providing a possible solution for the problem. In my grading of the assignment, I wrote that Ms. Brooks did not have a solution for the problem. In section 3, it states the student should explain why the arguments are strong or weak. I do not believe that Ms. Brooks did that, and I noticed on her paper. Each of these comments cost her 15 points. In section 4, it states that students should explain why their plan might not be successful in reducing the debt. I do not believe that Ms. Brooks addressed this on her paper, and I noted so. This cost her 15 points. And in section 5, it states that in section 5, the instructions say that students should explain how it affects the Native Americans. I don't believe Ms. Brooks did that. I note so on her paper. This cost her 15 points. You may also note that in the assignment, there are sometimes questions of comments about clarification. These are the who, what, when, where, and why comments. These requirements, this requirement is listed under the grading assignment for vague or unclear sections. Now, I will admit that this is more of a judgment call on my part. That's why I only deduct 15 points for a section being unclear when I write 2 or more such comments in a section. Also, I do not deduct for lack of clarity if a student has already lost points in that section for missing content. The instructions also require each section to be 1/2 page in length. For a paper with 1-inch margins and 12.12 New Roman font, which is all part of the instructions, there should be roughly 22 lines per page. I round that down to 20, and so a half page should be 10 lines of text. A section that is short loses 15 points, but I do not take all 15 at once. For every line short of 10 lines, 3 points are deducted, but with 15 points being the maximum. In Ms. Brooks' paper, in section 3, there's the number 2. This indicates that she was 2 lines short of 10 lines, and 2 times 3 is 6, so 6 points were deducted, plus the 15 points for missing content. In terms of grammar, I never take off grammar points unless there's a mark on the paper. Each grammar mark is associated with a requirement listed in the assignment. If we look at the first page of Mrs. Brooks' paper, you will see that there is a caret, the first page. You'll see there's a caret with the word and. This shows, I believe, she is missing the word and in that sentence, and the assignment states that 2 points will be deducted for a missing word. If you look at page 2, you'll see there's a line through the letter F in the word forward. This indicates that it should not be capitalized. This type of mistake also comes with a 2-point penalty. You also notice off the side an IS. This indicates that the sentence is incomplete, and that is worth 5 points. That is a 5-point penalty on the assignment. There are many marks on the paper, but I will not go through all of them. I assure you that when I returned the paper, I went through every single mark with the students. I wrote the marks on the board and explained which aspects of the assignments correspond to the marks and how many points it cost. I will say I spent roughly 15 minutes in the class explaining how I graded this assignment. At the end of the explanation, I provide information for how students could talk to me about their individual paper, and I encourage students to come to my office hours and discuss their paper. Ms. Brooks came to my office hours on December 3rd to talk about her paper. I will quote from the email I sent Dee and George on December 4th, 2024. I went over this rubric with her yesterday during my office hours. I explained to her every single aspect of the rubric, how many issues would be reflected on a paper, and how many points each issue cost her. I also explained to her the procedure for how she could challenge me on any aspect of grading she disagreed with. Ms. Brooks stated in her grade appeal that I would not change the grade. This is false. I was willing to change her grade and explain the procedure for challenging her grade. She also stated that I told her to go to an English teacher to explain her grade. I told her to circle any grammar marks that she would like to dispute. I would look over them, and then she could go to an English teacher, and any marks the English teacher disagreed with, I would give the points back. This is the policy I have with all students, and I adopted this policy because I thought it would be the best way to resolve the dispute in a fair manner. At some point, Ms. Brooks did understand the grading procedure because she met with me again on December 9th. I will quote from an email I sent right after that meeting. She followed my procedure for challenging her content of the grade on a final paper. I informed her that I would not return points for one section of paper, but I might return points for another section.
Dr. Hosey,
okay.
I apologize for
That's fine.
but you've hit 10 minutes. That said, I see that you have some more slides. You will have the opportunity to respond later and can pick up here if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this concludes the original cases in chief. The committee will now hear responses, starting with the student. Ms. Brooks, you may proceed. You have 5 minutes.
So I would like to talk about me meeting with Mr. Hosey. I did, in fact, meet with him 3 additional times after the email talking about the essay, the analysis essay, simply because although I did receive the email, I did want to talk to him too, because that is easier and helps me understand what he's trying to say. And when I did meet with him, the times I met with him, he did tell me to follow the feedback on my outline assignment. And honestly, that gave me reassurance that, okay, maybe I was overcomplicating it. He just told me to just follow his feedback, and my outline wasn't bad. So I was like, okay, I'll follow the feedback and I'll manage to do that. But despite that, I got a failing grade. So I just do want to clarify, I did meet with him outside of that email. In fact, it was after the email that prompted me to meet with him because I knew it just would have been clearer to actually speak to him. And I also want to talk about how the grading in of itself doesn't match the learning outcomes. And even then, there was still just too much focus on the grammar, which I do appreciate the attention to detail. However, my issue was, as much as he was detailed about the grammar, he did not show that same favor towards the content of the essay, which is the major part of the grade and is also the issue because I want to know about the content. I completely understood the grammar. I needed to know about the content, which was 100 points worth of the thing, not 200, like I said before. And also since you just saw the rubric, yeah, all of his deduction of points, a lot of things he said, I didn't know there were other things that would help him with grading the assignment because it wasn't listed on the rubric how exactly he would be grading it. It just told us what all these things he was going to take points off for, which did allow it to be inconsistent because even a lot of the stuff he was talking about, he was saying he believed that something was like this or another thing was like that, which is really the issue. The problem is that this allows for inconsistencies when he's grading other students' papers because he has too much going on, but at the same time, not enough clarity in what he's doing on his rubric, because clearly he does use his rubric to grade, which is the issue. It just allows for different things for different people, and it also allows for him to unknowingly change what he's doing for each student or how he's feeling, or maybe he's on the last assignment because he's tired, so he's being a little more harsh about it because the rubric just allows him to do that. So that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Ms. Brooks. All right, Professor Hosey, you may now give a response. You have 5 minutes. Professor Hosey?
Okay, sorry. Picking up where I left off, I will now quote from an email that I sent after the meeting. She followed my procedure for challenging her content grade in the final paper. I informed her that I would not return points. No, well, that's the wrong email. I mean, that's the wrong PowerPoint anyways. I informed her that I would not return points for one section of paper, but I might return points for another section. I did end up adding 15 points to the grade for a final paper assignment based on that section that you talked to me about. I noted in the email that she seemed to understand why I took off points because you cannot follow my procedure for challenging your grade if you don't understand why points were taken off. After I sent this email to Dean George, I was informed that Ms. Brooks and Dean George emailed about this final meeting I had with the student, and that was the last of I heard of the issue until February 7th, 2025. Now, to address some of the comments that Ms. Brooks made, right? One of the comments that she made was that the grade would result in a, is that me or is that somebody else? Sorry. She noted that the grade would, the grading would result in a negative score, which is absolutely not the case. Let me consult, or let me show you the assignment itself, all right? In the assignment itself, it says the paper is worth a minimum of 50 points. All right, so any final paper assignment that's turned in would never receive a negative score, nor would it even receive a 0. Any student who turns in an assignment receives at least a grade of 50, all right? Now, in terms of awkward or confusing sentences, the explanation for awkward or confusing sentences, all right, is different, right? Essentially, they have the same penalty, all right? And again, I say this is a little bit of a judgment call on my part, but I say to students that I read and reread sentences multiple times to make sure that I understand them, right? And if I read it multiple times and I still don't understand it, I think that would qualify as an awkward or confusing sentence, right? Confusing just means it's just completely out of my understanding. Awkward meaning maybe I understand what it means, but I'm not certain, all right? But the penalty is the same, all right? Now, she commented that it wasn't what I said, it was how I said it. I would like to apologize to her if I said things in a rude way. I will say that in my class, I do have a professor responsibility promise. In that, I say that that I will treat students with respect. If a student feels that I have not treated them with respect, they can come and talk to me, and I will apologize. And I have apologized to students in the past. She says that I implied that she was stupid. That is something that I would never, ever do. Even when students give incorrect answers in class, I try to say, close or sort of, I try to be encouraging. I never want to make a student feel dumb. Now, in terms of the grammar component, all right, the reason that I grade based on grammar is because of a core learning objective, and now I'm having difficulty with my presentation. Most instructors will know this, though. I don't have to go to my syllabus, but I'm trying to get there. But in the core learning objective, one of those things that I am required to evaluate is written communication, and I grade that on a 1 to 5 point scale, right?
Professor Hosey, your
yes,
time has expired.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions regarding the arguments and record before us? And Mr. Hosey, Professor Hosey, you may want to stop sharing. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm sorry, I have one question. So the final grade on the final paper, I'm just trying to figure out what was the final grade, because I saw one thing and then he did say he added 15 points or so. So I'm just trying to determine what was the final grade on the paper after anything was added.
108 points out of 200 points. My grading in my class is 1,000 points. So every student begins with 1,000 points. Then for tests and assignments, you can lose points on those. So the final score for her final paper assignment was a 108 out of 200. When I say the minimum score for a final paper assignment is 50, I mean a 50 out of 200. Ms. Brooks is in the grade complaint uses the number 46. This is because the original grade was a 93, and she is dividing by 2 on a 100-point scale. That is not how I grade in my class. Some assignments are worth 100, some assignments are worth 50. The final paper assignment is worth 200. As I stated, the grade is out of 1,000 points. Miss Brooks ended the class with 799 points. 800 points is a B. I gave her a B for the class overall. So her college grade for this class was a B, which like I said, is 800 points, and I just rounded that 799 up to 800. So it is a little bit different than other teachers, because like I said, I do it based on 1,000 points total, and the total number of points that you earn in the class, that determines your letter grade.
And since that question wasn't directed to anyone specifically, I'd also like for the student to have an opportunity to respond.
Can you please restate the question?
Yes, I was just asking what the final grade was on the paper overall, what the grade was overall after it may have been changed.
Yes, like Mr. Hosey said, the final grade on the assignment was 108 out of 200, which is calculated to a 54, which the reason why I calculated into the 40 and 50 numbers is because on the high school level, that is what they do. So I'm like I said before, I am in the top 2% of my class, so I am actively calculating my grade. And thankfully, I had really good grades in that class. I had about a 95 before the final assignment, even with the poor grade on the letter assignment, because all my other grades are really good. So that's how I managed to still pass the class. However, if I did have a C, I could have potentially been in trouble. But yes, the final grade was 108 out of 200 points.
Does anyone else? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks. Go ahead.
No, I said I was done speaking. Sorry, I thought the silence was, yeah.
No worries. Does anyone have any other questions from the committee?
Is my advocate able to make any comments if she wishes?
The time for her to have made the comments would have been in the 10 minutes or the 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there being no other questions, this concludes our time for this appeal hearing. So before adjourning, I need to confirm whether either or both parties intend to submit any additional evidence to me by tomorrow at 5 p.m. Ms. Brooks, do you intend to send anything in?
Yes, I intend to send in some additional evidence.
Okay.
And I would email that directly to you. I wouldn't loop anyone else in the email.
Just email it to me. I will distribute it from there.
Okay.
Thank you. Professor Hosey?
I will email you evidence, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
While people, to interrupt, while people are planning on submitting additional evidence, I think it would be beneficial for the committee if you could both send your PowerPoints over as well.
That was the evidence that I was going to send.
Oh, well then that's perfect.
And that was also a part of the evidence I was going to send, including something else.
Sounds good.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank y'all for the clarification. The committee will deliberate and review the record and issue a recommendation to the Vice President of Instruction per the board policy FLDB local within 5 business days. The Vice President of Instruction will review the recommendation from the committee and make a final decision. The Vice President of Instruction will communicate this decision to the student and appropriate dean within 5 business days. If the decision requires a grade change, the registrar's office will be notified to update the student's record. So thank you. This hearing is adjourned, so everyone except the committee is dismissed at this time.